everybody, and welcome to The Main Thread. On this podcast, we're going to explore the journey from mid-senior to staff plus level software engineer. I'm Brian Ogilvie, and my friend and co-host Alex Gaiser and I will be digging into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make that leap from senior engineer within your team to a true technical leader with organization or company-wide impact. Each episode, we'll interview staff engineers from some of the world's largest tech companies like Meta, Google, and Amazon, as well as some of the executives who lean on these engineers for setting and implementing their technical direction. We'll also interview technical leaders from some smaller companies so that we can provide the broadest possible perspective and hopefully one that's useful to you on your career journey. In this first episode, Alex and I get together to discuss who we are, our mission for this podcast, and where we are on this journey from senior to staff. We're excited to share this journey with you. Let's get into it. Why don't we start by kind of introducing ourselves and saying a little bit about why we're here, why we're doing this. You want to start?
Mm-hmm. So I'm Alex. I'm a software engineer, senior software engineer with Bazaar Voice, BV, a content management, social media management, and analytics company. I spend a lot of my time building things to scrape and post to all your favorite social media networks. It's not much, but it's honest work. So we've started this podcast to kind of see what we can do to take our careers to the next level. How about you, Brian?
So yeah, I'm Brian Ogilvie, and I am a software engineer at Meta. I've been there for just under 3 years now. I work on the enterprise side of things, working in infrastructure and security. And Alex and I were talking recently. We both went through the same boot camp when we were entering the tech industry a few years back. We came out of General Assembly together, both found our first jobs in the industry at the same time, and have been working and just kind of staying close since then, and have, worked through a number of different jobs, worked up, gotten promotions. But we both have a number of different resources that we use on a regular basis or have always used to find content on technical concepts and breaking into the industry, et cetera. But we were talking recently that it doesn't seem there's much content available for people who are now actually pretty firmly established in the industry, have been around, have had some success, and are looking to move from that mid/senior level up to that much more senior level, that staff/principal level. And we thought it would be helpful both to us and to anyone else who's out there kind of at a similar part in their journey to talk about this. So what we want to do with this podcast is we want to talk about some of the concepts that are important for growing beyond that mid-senior level. And we want to do it not just with the two of us, but we want to bring on people we know, people who are already staff plus engineers at various companies of different sizes. We want to bring in managers, executives from these type of companies to hear their thoughts on what they look for in terms of their staff engineers, their principal engineers, who they trust and why. And we just thought we'd share our journey as we're on this path looking to take our careers to the next level. So I thought we'd start out with just a couple of things like, what do we know? What do we know here? What have we learned so far in terms of our careers? What's taken us from the very intro level junior jobs to these promotions and getting to the level we're at now? And what do we think is probably going to be different about the path from here to the next level?
Yeah, I'd say that the first thing that we've probably learned, the biggest lesson that we've learned, is that it's about process and people over projects and code. It's often about how you're able to organize people rather than how fast you're able to grind out the specific solution to a problem. You want to be I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but you want to be a force multiplier. You want to be somebody who can organize people to get things done, who can help lubricate.
Yeah, for sure.
To lubricate the process so that, things that are able to run smoothly. And I suppose one of the things that I've learned is just the value of consistency. It becomes extremely unwieldy to work on a large project over a long period of time when it's like digging through layers of archaeology when you're looking back through a code that was written a month ago, a year ago. And it's like, you can just see by the standards and practices that were used to implement that particular piece of code, be like almost to the year or to the month when it was written, because there's no consistency. And that becomes very difficult because you basically have to, like an archaeologist, learn about all the different strata as you go back in time. Whereas if it's all one uniform thing throughout the entire code base or for years and years and years, which is very difficult to do, becomes much, it's almost becomes a shortcut to learn, when you go from one piece of code to the next. If you see one pattern one place and you spend a lot of time learning about it, its strengths, its weaknesses, you go all the way back to, I don't know, a year. Maybe might be a bit of a stretch, but like, you go all the way back a year in the same repo and you see the same pattern implemented. um, Suddenly you don't have to learn that entire piece of code all over again, that entire project all over again. Generally speaking, what to expect. You can kind of get a sixth sense even for like where things are going to be, how it's likely to have been implemented. And that is just, it speeds things up. It reduces cognitive load. We can probably talk about books we like later, but there's a book that I really like that talks a ton about things like cognitive load. And one of the things that we've learned as we've gotten older, and I guess less exciting, is that things like process and consistency are things that, when you see it, it makes you happier than any elegantly written piece of code. And I'll often take like a consistently written code base that's maybe not the most like concise or elegant over one that's like beautiful and concise, and does something in some like novel, interesting way. Sometimes novelty is the enemy, in fact.
So can you talk to me a little bit about when you say consistency, what does that mean exactly in this context? Um, Being consistent
I mean,
about what
like
types of things?
standards and practices, everything from like I said, what patterns you use, what technologies you use. Not always bringing in a third party solution, like a third party package to solve a problem. Not, I mean, I've seen this. I've worked in code bases where we had four different in the same repository, four different logging um, packages that we used. Um, they all did slightly different things, and they all did one or two things better than each other, in addition, of course, to
Mhm.
our custom one that we built ourselves. Um, and the the problem was, of course, is that once you got into things like security or trying to figure out how one of them worked or how, you know, what one of them did better than anything else, the problem is suddenly you don't know which, if you're working with one of them and they're very similar, you find out that like, oh, security doesn't work for one of them, so now you need to remove it, or you have to decide if you want to keep it. That means that you have to do a whole lot more work to maintain it than if you had just chosen one, maybe slightly suboptimal, but single um, solution. And in the case of third party packages, when you don't have control over what their dependencies, if they're ever going to just be deprecated or that sort of thing, if you, the more of those you maintain, the more unwieldy your code base becomes. And so being consistent in terms of like vetting and choosing a single, if you're going to choose to go the third party route, choosing a single one and being consistent with it throughout your entire project lifecycle. Or if you're going to spin up your own, being consistent about that as well. Um, so when I say consistency, I mean basically doing the same thing over and over again, like being, measuring twice and cutting once, and then sticking with it and not always trying to over optimize. When I'm talking about third party packages, like React is always susceptible to this. The whole JavaScript ecosystem, because NPM is so easy to contribute to, the whole React and uh, JavaScript ecosystem in general is very susceptible to the idea of, you can just, you can't, younger people or maybe not less experienced people will just download a React library for every
Yeah. Oh
component,
yeah, there's a package for
or a
that.
React
There's a
library,
package for that.
right, for everything. And the problem is that's great. It saves you a little bit of time in the short run, but if you go overboard and you're using slightly different third-party packages for every problem, or not checking back what people had done before, or having to maintain all of them, that becomes a problem. So I guess when I'm talking about consistency, that's a slightly different problem. Well, there's kind of two problems here, which is like maybe like, you know, bloat, but then there's also, but bloat can arise from a failure to be consistent in your processes and in your practices, right? So like if you choose a third party package, you know, and then you are inconsistently applying it, that causes bloat. And that causes the
Yeah.
problem that you are, yeah, and that is causes the other, and those problems compound, I think. That's something that I've learned anyway, to like, to not just rely on like out of the box solutions from third parties. Um, or if I do, spending a lot of time making sure that I'm using ones that we've already, checking what ones we already have in the project first before I go and find a new one.
So I think a lot of times I feel like you sometimes like learning those personal practices of saying, okay, before I just pull something else in, maybe I need to do a little bit more research about what's already here. What are the downsides of bringing this in? Um, and I think there's a ton of that involved in your personal growth as an engineer and developing your own productivity and your own care over the code base that you're in charge of. And then I think there's a big step from that to learning that personal practice to growing to the point where you are helping your entire organization uh, instill that set of values. There's a concept I've read in I think it's the pragmatic programmer, which we'll link in the show notes. But he talks about don't live with broken windows, right? The idea of if you're living in a neighborhood where a window gets broken, if nobody fixes it, if that window just stays broken, it gives everybody there the sense that no one really cares that much about the place. And sure enough, like more things start breaking, right? Somebody's paint gets chipped and it stays. And, it just, these things have a way of festering, right? And it's the same thing in your code base, right? You want to instill that sense throughout your organization of pride in what it is that you're doing, pride in the quality of your product. And part of that is, you don't want to have a bunch of unused packages around creating security risks and creating slow bundles, huge bundles for your consumers, that kind of thing. And yeah, a lot of times I find that now as I'm trying to move into this more senior level, so much of it becomes around demonstrating with data, usually, what I think is the right way to do things, and drumming up support and getting people to rally behind that. Because again, it's one thing for me to just say, hey guys, we got to be doing this, we got to be doing this, we got to fix what we're doing, we got to clean up this, get these test suites to pass, et cetera, or increase our test coverage, et cetera. But like, if I'm not backing it up with data, and if I'm not getting enthusiasm, buy-in from not only my peers, but also leadership, upper leadership, then I'm not really doing the job that a company expects from a staff engineer, right? That's one of the things that I've heard consistently from my manager and from more senior ICs who have been around longer than I have. That one of the main things that staff engineers do is they are consistently in communication with leadership, like upper level management, directors, et cetera. They lean on their staff engineers to help drive the direction of the org. So it's not, I think that the biggest difference between like a senior engineer and a staff engineer is that a senior engineer can operate in a ton of ambiguity, get a project done, deliver it on time, come up with great technical solutions. But the staff engineer is the one who is saying, wow, in an ocean of a million projects that need to get done, which are the top priorities for this organization? And how can I come up with a technical solution that we can get buy-in across teams, right? I think that is one of the things that I feel like I need to work on almost more than anything, is that sense of like, I need to be solving problems for my organization, not waiting for my organization to tell me what to do. Like that is kind of the biggest shift, I think, in the paradigm between a senior engineer who is very accomplished and can get things done with a team of people, and the one that leadership is really going to lean on. So that's another thing I want to talk about, actually, is the concept of leadership in general. Because I think when I was a junior, I tended to think that like there's engineers and there's managers, right? Like there's the people who build the stuff, there's the people who write the code, and then there's the people who like manage it all. And those are the leaders, and these are the ICs, right? And I think that there's a staff engineer is a leader, right? Whether it's a tech lead, specifically that type of senior engineer, but you're more than just someone who executes on your own. You are someone who leads the technical direction, even though you're not a manager, you're not in that management track. That's something that I feel like I want to focus on in a lot of our interviews here and our talks with each other, is what does that look like? What is leadership, and how does it differ from leadership in an executive track, right? What does it look like to be a technical leader?
Exactly. And how people have had that impact. I mean, like people who are already at that level. That's something that I always am looking for examples of in my job and with the people that I talk to. Is like, how do you make those impacts? Because like we've probably made pretty clear, the hardest thing is not often the technical solution. It's getting people to do things that they maybe don't want to do. And like you said, with the data, that helps, and it certainly can make your case. But until you can get somebody excited about it or somebody to want to work on it, it doesn't mean anything a lot of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
often you can twist people's arms, but it's not. You're going to get a lot less work done than if you can get everybody excited about the idea. It's a famous quote, but it's basically like, if you can give people, a feeling of importance and a feeling of buy-in, you know, you can get them to do anything, right? So figuring out how to get people excited about something is one of the most valuable skills in any job. And as we get higher and higher and farther away from the actual nitty gritty, hands dirty code details, I think it just becomes more and more important. Every project I've had that involves other people lives and dies on how well I can get people interested in it, and how well I can get people to, um, you know, buy in to why it's valuable. We've done a number of process changes. I won't go into the details because they're frankly rather mundane, but I think they're very important, and data certainly helps. But until it's never been until sometimes the data will be enough for certain types of things. But for process things, often it's like not until you can really demonstrate value to somebody's life or get them excited about why it's a valuable thing before they'll actually even start doing it. Because you can't be their babysitter. You can't just monitor them all the time. It takes so much energy to get people to just sit there and watch, and I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you're a little, you know, gargoyle sitting on their shoulder, like telling them what to
Mm-hmm.
do. And you can't do that. It's a total drain on your energy if you can't get them people to want to do it
Yeah.
on their own.
So I want to go I want to extend from that. So follow me for a second while I kind of go a long way around
Hmm.
here. Um, I think that juniors, young, newly hired engineers who are talented but are given very clear scope, they measure their progress, their impact in terms of like sprints, right? Like we've asked an IC3 to you know implement this one form, right, and they get it done in a sprint, let's say, and that's their impact. It's really easy to see, like, hey, I did this, I shipped it, I was asked and I did a good job. That's my impact, right? And as you get a little more senior, maybe you start measuring your impact in terms of like a whole project or a large feature with a lot of different moving pieces, right, where you get that in place, and maybe it takes a couple months, right, but you're able to measure that impact to say that, yep, we had this project and we executed on it over the course of the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks. We delivered. We can measure its usage. That's our impact, right? But as you get beyond that, as you start getting in that real staff, you're measuring your progress, and not in terms of weeks or months, but in terms of halves, maybe even years, to solve a really large technical problem with a whole lot of moving pieces and a whole lot of blockers and a whole lot of ambiguity. Um, and I think one of the hardest things about that, one of the things I've heard some of our most senior engineers talk about, is when you've got a project that is going to span multiple halves or even years, you need to figure out how to start adding value as you go, right? You can't say, hey, 2 years from now, all of this that I'm working on, I promise it's going to be super valuable, right? The steps you take, you need to be very careful about what you prioritize and how you order things, so that as you're taking that journey that's going to last a couple of years, you need to be able to show value along the way, right? There needs to be something that you're adding that's actually valuable. And so the reason I think about this is because sometimes it's like you want to change a process and refine something because maybe it's a better engineering need. Maybe it's trying to lock down security risks or get a hold of where your user data is, all of that kind of stuff that larger companies have to deal with, right? You can't just say, hey, we're going to do this thing that's going to be really hard and it's going to take years and we're all going to slog through it, right? You need to be able to say,
Right.
by the end of the next month, we will have accomplished this tiny chunk of this 2 year process. And this is what the value will be, because as you start building those little bitty chunks of positive impact, you start gaining momentum in that project, right? And so over the course of the first year of a 2 year project, you might be able to say, we're only halfway to where we want to be, but in that year, we've accomplished these things that have already brought down this amount of latency by this percent, or this we've identified and locked down this many millions of instances of improperly exposed user data, that kind of thing, right? Those are the kind of things that I think as a staff engineer, you have to be able to think long term, think about things in years, and then be able to break those down into actually meaningful chunks of impact. And that's the biggest, I think, the reason that why leadership do lean on these types of engineers is because that's leadership's time frame, right? Like they're thinking about how to improve the company in the next 5-10 years, right? And they need engineers that are thinking on that level too.
That's right. And I think that numbers are persuasive. I think that's one thing that I've learned quite a bit, is that being able to quantify it instead of just saying, I feel like this is going to be better, and being able to demonstrate that value when people don't have an easy way to measure it, whenever you can give them real numbers to work with, is very valuable. And that's something that I've started doing a lot more recently, is like, um, yeah, just trying to figure out how to quantify everything in a way that's like easy to digest, but also concrete. Because I don't know, I feel like people get a lot of like, this is just going to be better, trust me. And so when you're able to demonstrate that it's going to be this much better, and here's how I'm measuring it, people are a lot happier. I've gotten a lot better at using tools that are completely, I mean, this is maybe something else we can talk about, but I've gotten a lot better at tools that are not at all related to software engineering. For that reason, I've been building a lot more. I don't know if are familiar with Mode. You guys probably have some sort of special custom like meta version of this, but
Maybe, but what is Mode?
but it's basically like it allows you to run SQL queries and materialize data on all your databases, basically. So you write a little like SQL query, and then it'll grab all the data, put it in a table for you. It's easy to write joins with, and but
Is
also
it
you
is
can
it like
chart
a
data.
data pipeline denormalization type of thing?
It's actually basically like Sisense, where I used to work before this.
Okay.
But it's a little bit more focused just on the the data side of things. The point is, like, I barely ever have had to write SQL in my career, but I'm writing a lot more SQL lately, because I'm basically just pulling numbers from the database, able to say like this many posts were created over this many months, this many users created posts with or created data points with this type of content, and this is how we were able to demonstrate that this is an increase or a decrease, whatever we want, over the past several months, based off of work that we've done, because we're able to
Mhm.
grab it from that information.
Yeah, it's
So
funny.
just
I
like,
think like we
yeah.
have a very sophisticated and mature ORM that we use for so we have like a application query layer that we use for all our production code. So I never ever write SQL for my production code. However, for
Right.
my working on my project and deciding what we're going to do, or figuring
Mm-hmm.
out how users are using my project, I write SQL all the time, for all of
Mm-hmm.
these our logging tables and that kind of stuff. Then it does become, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that SQL, not so much for production, but for making business decisions, becomes so important.
Yeah, never for production. Like I don't think I've ever written a production line of SQL, and I don't. And if anybody ever asked me to, I probably would want their head examined. I can't think of many reasons why it would be, you know, particularly good idea. I mean, I'm sure there's
You must
some
not
edge
be
case, but
working in a code base that began as PHP in the early 2000s.
right. I'm just saying, like, there should that's normally it's just funny because I've come full circle all around it, because I learned SQL a while ago, just to learn how all of that works. Maybe I'm in a different world because I've also done a lot of NoSQL over the past several years, but recently we've been doing a lot of the work databases I've been working with have been in SQL. Don't touch any SQL. Most of the database access stuff was also abstracted away years ago. But I write quite a bit of SQL by hand in order to, in order to write little reports that I'm always giving out to people to say, like, this is what we need to do, and this is why it's useful, and all that sort of stuff. exactly like what you were
All
talking
right, so
about.
we got about 5 minutes left here, and I think it'd be great if we could each recommend something that we think is a great resource for people who are on this journey in
Hmm.
their careers. Um, do you have a book or an article or something you wanna throw out?
Well, actually, I've got it here because I don't ever leave it too far away. So when I'm trying to work my way through again now, Refactoring by Martin Fowler. It's always a classic because it's amazing and everybody knows it's
Yeah,
amazing.
fantastic book, and that's one I go back to all the time. I think as I write code, and also we just talked before the episode started recording that we've both been on call this week, and a lot of times when
Hmm.
I am dealing with a bug ticket in one of the projects that's not my main project, one that I don't work on all the time, it takes me a while to sort of get oriented in the corner of the code base where the bug is coming from, and a lot of times I think, okay, since I have fresh eyes on this, right? I didn't write it myself. Why am I confused? Right? What's here like that's making it hard
Hmm.
for me to understand the bug? And that
Hmm.
usually presents a very good opportunity for refactoring, right? Like a way to just
Hmm.
even that one of my favorite parts of the book is swapping lines in the refactoring book. I remember like just kind of moving lines that are
Hmm.
related close to each other within the body of some other larger function, and when
Hmm.
you get them all kind of close enough together where the function still works properly, but you can reason about the logic, then you can take those groups and make them their own functions, right? And that's like one of the most simple techniques from that book, but I love it and I use it all the time. Yeah, so refactoring is awesome, awesome book. So the one I want to pick here is called Staff Engineer. This was written by Will Larson, who was an
Hmm.
engineering manager at Stripe at the time that he wrote it, and he wrote down his thoughts around what it takes to become a staff engineer, a staff plus, as he calls it, and also how to thrive once you get that position. It's a great book. I've read it once. I'm still working my way through it again for a second time. He's got terrific interviews in it from other senior engineers, excuse me, staff plus engineers at places like Stripe, Google, a number of other large tech companies. The book is just full of tons of knowledge. And I think it'd be great for us to kind of spend some time in some of our interviews with staff engineers talking about sections of the book to see um, how their experience either jives or differs from that. But I can't recommend it enough for anyone who is currently looking to become beyond senior and really start influencing their entire organizations and companies as a technical leader.
Well, I'm sold. I've ordered it on Amazon.
There you
Probably
go.
should have done
See, I've
that
already already made a
before
sale.
we started.
Well, with our final minute, want to just say thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a journey again. Like this is Alex and I just want to share our learning as we're on this journey, and hopefully we will learn from some really smart people and learn from each other, and hopefully hear back from our listeners as well about what they want to hear about, and look forward to learning together. Well, till next one.